Boys and girls, when I was little, I would see little action figures to play with to act out movies, but it was always fun to make your own toys. My brothers and I, we would make forts, and if we were thinking about the Three Little Pigs, we would get our own rocks and bricks and wood and hay. Minions, you can make them out of toilet paper tubes. It's just fun to pretend making stories with things that you can find. Well, guess what? A long time ago, kids were just like you. In fact, they didn't have toy stores. They, of course, had to make their own toys. So back in ancient Egypt and in China and in Greece, you will find the archaeologists, and we'll put them in museums, toys that kids would make. Here's a doll that a child made. Here are some balls that were found in Greece that had been made by hand. Imagine the kid finding clay and wood and being able to shape that to play, or make a doll or a yo-yo. These people even used bone in order to make a game. Well, back in the Greek days, there were some toys that would be found of horses on these wheels. And even in the days after the Greeks and going into the Romans, they would find it. So let's talk about why they would be making horses with wheels. If you look on this map, you'll see an area called Greece in red, circled in red. And then the word Troy on the opposite side of the Aegean Sea is Troy, circled in blue. Well, those two places were constantly fighting. And the story of the Trojan War is one that kids love. Let me tell it to you now. A long time ago, there was a city named Troy. The city was very rich and had great treasures inside its wall. Hearing the stories about the wealth that was there, the Greek king decided that he was going to take his army there to steal their gold. Hundreds of warships with thousands of Greek soldiers sailed to Troy to try to conquer the city. But the Trojans, spotting the invasion, locked themselves into their huge fortress, and no matter what the Greeks tried to do, they could not get in. The Greeks tried everything for years, but it was impossible, and the Greek king was getting furious. Suddenly, one morning, without notice, the Greeks simply disappeared, never to be seen. Where had they gone? The Trojan king sent the soldiers out to look and to check to see if they had retreated in defeat. The Trojans looked and looked, but no Greek was to be found. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a huge wooden horse. The Trojans all gathered up at the beach, contemplating the horse. "This is an offer from the Greeks. It's a gift to celebrate our victory, so we can forever remember the time we defeated them in battle. Let's bring it into the city." "We shouldn't bring that in from the Greeks into our town," the old man said. The king thought about it and said, let's bring it inside. Let's bring it into Troy." So in they put it in the city. Peace returned to Troy, and everyone returned to their normal lives. After a couple days, there was a party, and every Trojan went into the forest. But meanwhile, a small door opened in the Trojan horse, and out came hundreds of Greek soldiers who had been hiding inside. They came out of the horse and stole all the gold of Troy. When the Trojans returned, they were surprised to see how they'd been tricked by the Greeks. They learned the lesson that sometimes what appears to be a gift can be a trick instead. The end. Well, boys and girls, it would be so fun, you can only imagine, for a child to go out and collect some of the red clay that was near their homes and to form it into little action figures or figurines or toys where they could act out the story of the Trojan War. And if you look at some of the details on all these different horses, you can see that there were a lot of different ways to be able to decorate your play toy. Here's one that I made. You can see that there aren't any wheels on it yet. We're going to be adding wooden wheels later. Your job is simply going to be to design a horse that you could pretend that there were people inside of it. And you want to make it kind of cool looking. You want to make it look like something that the Trojans would think, oh yeah, this was a gift. This was something nice. Let's take it into our city. So you're going to be starting off with the clay that you had in a bag, and you're going to be taking some of it to form the body of your horse. Now, in class, we had a little wooden guy that we stuck in there just so that we wouldn't smash it. You're basically just making kind of an oval round and then just kind of hollow it out a little bit so it doesn't take 16 years to dry. So we kind of called it a potato. You're kind of making that potato shape. And after that, you get to continue on making some really cool stuff with your horse. So the first thing you're going to be working on is making the neck and the head. And you'll notice that it's kind of like rolling out a cheese stick or something like that, bending it over, and then you're going to be attaching it to what we called our potato. Now, when you attach it, it's going to fall off if you think you're just going to smash it together. What you have to do is make sure that you are gently smearing it together. It should look like that clay originally was one big piece. If you don't do the shmira and you just shove it on there, I promise you by tomorrow your head's going to fall off, and that would be sad. Now, in order to do the mane, there's two ways of doing it. You can just pinch a little bit as you go and make the mane come out a little bit. Your other option would be to leave it the way it was and to roll out a little snake and then to add that to your horse. And again, you're going to need to do a little bit of shmira so it doesn't fall off. We had some that when it dried, that little piece just fell off and looked like a snake sitting on the table. You got to make sure that you rub that in there. Now you see that I have a little cutting tool. If at home, you can just use a little knife or something like that. Make sure your parents say it's okay for you to be able to cut up your clay. And now I'm adding an ear, and I'm just going to say it again. Every time you add something, you have to make sure that it's shmira. And you're using air dry clay, which means that it's just going to dry in the air and harden. And if things fall off, you probably could come back later and glue it together. Do know that you should not bring these to school, because I would imagine that just trying to get it to school, it's probably going to break. Now, you notice that I just made sure the tail was on there. And now it's kind of fun because you get to make decorations for your horse. So I'm just using my pointy little knife thing. And again, you can use one from home. It's no big deal. And I'm starting to add little sections in my clay. And I can start to add details. When you look at the idea sheets that I'm including on WCS Connect, you're going to be able to see that they would add little designs on there that they would just draw on with the sharp end. If you have a toothpick, that would work great. Or again, just using a dinner knife, you're going to be able to use that as well. You'll be surprised how many details you can get on there just with a little pointed object. So I'm adding some lines onto the mane, and the minute you run out of ideas, you can look back at your idea sheet. That's why I made it for you, so that you can just keep adding things on there and keep going and going. Now, because yours is going to be at home, another thing that you can use your clay for is to add some wheels. Now, your wheels aren't going to roll, but if you just make 4 little balls of clay and flatten them out, and then add them to the sides of your potato, your horse, then at the end, it's going to look like a Trojan horse that got rolled into the city, and it's going to look great. If you're staying home, if you have any paint or even the watercolor paint that I gave you to take home, you can use that later on to actually paint your horse and to give it different colors. So here I'm just using a pencil even to use the eraser to poke into the horse to add some texture. I can do that in the front, But just know that today would be the day to do it, because tomorrow it will probably have hardened so much that you're not going to be able to add anything to it. Here I found a pen that had kind of a cool design on it, so I'm actually pressing that into the clay. I know that you're going to find some stuff at home that you're going to be able to press into the clay to create what we call texture. So boys and girls, after you make your potato, the body, you're going to be rolling out pieces of clay like I have here, the neck and the head. You're going to roll out a little cheese stick, bend over the head, and trust me, at first you're probably going to think your horse looks awful. That's just normal. Or maybe you're going to love it, but whatever. But know that when you start adding the head or the mane, and you start adding nostrils, and you add the ears, it's going to look great. Be sure to send me a picture. Have fun.